Welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast, where we dive into inspiring stories, thrilling adventures, and expert insights from leaders and legends across the outdoor adventure community. Whether you're an avid hiker, passionate camper, or adventure traveler, each episode brings you up close and personal with guests who've lived it, explored it, and made it their mission to share their experiences with you. Let's get after it. Hello again, everyone. Today on episode 477, I'm talking with David Mcllvaney. David and I are both members of the Outdoor Writers Association of America. David describes himself as a writer, angler, hunter, and sentimentalist who lives in the Catskill Mountains where he draws water and hews wood while pondering things big and small. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rick. It's great to see you again, man.
You too, yeah. So you're in front of some cabin. Is that your cabin? That's beautiful.
I am in front of some cabin. Yeah, this is my cabin in the Catskills. I'm at the end of a dead end road, at the end of another dead end road. I've got about 25 acres here in the middle of the woods, a couple ponds, number of buildings. And this is where I spend the majority of my time. It's probably like a 3-season-y sort of situation. Mm-hmm. When the snow comes, it's really tough to get in here. Yeah. And then in the winter, I'm usually in Mexico. So I go down to in the Yucatan.
Okay.
In a old colonial city called Merida. Yeah. So then everything switches for me. I hang up my winter clothes and put on my linen and go down there, and my fishing changes. My outdoor life kind of changes, but it's kind of nice to just hang around by the pool and drink a margarita and chill out.
Yeah. I go to Loreto quite a bit. I have a good buddy that retired down there. So
in the Sea of Cortez.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was there last January on a press trip, actually.
Oh, cool. There's some good fishing down there. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. I guess deep sea stuff, which I really don't do. More of a fly angler, but.
Well, I've caught Dorado and Rooster on the fly down there.
Well, yeah, rooster fish, certainly. Yeah.
Dorado,
I just didn't have the time.
Big Dorado. That's super
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. In the
Sea of Cortez.
In the Sea of Cortez, really. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Near Laredo. That's cool.
Right off right off the coast there. Right off the town. You go out and the guy puts you out there and you start flipping flies. You can see them spooling up and it's wild.
Yeah.
Roosters are wild. Those things are
I know. I've never caught one, never fished for one. Someday I'll go back. It was a fairly tight schedule. It was my first press trip, actually, brought down by a company called Uncruise, which is an adventure cruise line.
I know Dan real well. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So they were kind enough to bring me and a few other writers down, and that was kind of cool. And I'd never been on a cruise before, so that was interesting.
Fun
to experience all that, but it was a really positive experience. And it was lucky that I got back to Merida and I write for a magazine called Yucatan Magazine and was able to write something up very quickly and get it published very quickly. So yeah, it really was good. It doesn't always work out that way.
Tell me about it. So can you share how you first got into writing and producing outdoor brand content? Was it always a passion or did it something specific spark your interest?
Yeah. So my main career way back when was in film and TV as a producer and executive producer and director sometimes. But with that job is always some aspect of writing. You're always cleaning something up or writing something on a fly, whatever that is. And then I got into doing brand writing and brand content creation for luxury beauty companies. So I did that for a number of years in New York City. And then COVID happened. Mm-hmm. And we left the city on March the 20th, came up to the cabin thinking the world was going to end like everybody else, all that stuff. And then we realized we were fine, but all work dried up kind of, especially my work. It was just not really happening. And at the time we had no phone signal up here, no Wi-Fi signal at all. So we were very isolated.
Pretty remote. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very remote. So I thought, well, I need to do something. I thought I'm going to write my 4 big fly fishing adventures. At that time, it happened to be Iceland, Patagonia, Nova Scotia for salmon, and South Tulum for bonefish and permit. And I thought, okay, these are pretty good. Then I looked up the big fly fishing mags. At that time happened to be Drake, Great Sporting Journal, Fly Fish Journal, and looked at their submission guidelines. And I was like, okay, the Drake in particular was, do you really want us to tell you what we think about your writing? It was a little, send it and we'll get back to you, but it'll probably be a while. And anyway, so I said, okay,
great magazine though. It's a great magazine.
It's a great magazine. Yeah. Tom Bide does a fantastic job with that magazine. So I sent it off and Honestly, I got a call the next day from the editor of the Fly Fish Journal who said, how do you feel about the next issue?
Wow.
I said, I feel fine. So that was it. So that was Iceland, I think. And then I managed to sell them all within a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So that started this
That was your first shot out? You sold them all the first time out?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Home
I got
run,
lucky.
the first at bat. Nice.
Yeah. It's the second at bat that really matters. But yeah, no, listen, I got very lucky with Jason Fly Fish Journal. I just hit him at the right time. He happened to have an open spot. He liked the piece. Hadn't done Iceland in a while, I guess. Yeah.
That's a big part of it too, the timing, right? Those guys are all
100%.
Especially nowadays, they're all inundated, I'm sure.
Yeah, I talked to an editor of a magazine recently, and he said, I am getting 1,200 submissions a year.
Wow.
And he's maybe whatever he's publishing, it's 40, let's say, or whatever that is. Yeah, I just can't even imagine.
How to go through that many. He's got to have even with your staff. That's unbelievable.
Well, I think and I think what it comes down to in that case is something that is very true in the film and television business. As you can imagine, there are thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of scripts out there that are going around, that are being sent, et cetera, et cetera. And you talk to script readers whose job is to go through it and summarize it or whatever, and they will tell you they have a 5-page rule. And if you have not kind of captivated them a little bit within 5 pages, it gets tossed in the file.
So probably relationships too. A lot of relationships.
Well, obviously relationships. No, of course.
5 pages. Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, it's brutal because they can't read everything.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can show somebody how you write very quickly. So I got very lucky last year. I sent something off to Wirt Parker. I don't know if Wirt. He was down in Alabama with us. But anyway, he's the editor at large for the Tom Beckby Field Journal. Tom Beckby is a men's sporting clothing company, I guess.
Oh, I remember meeting him there.
Yeah. I said something to Worth on just really on the fly. And again, I got really lucky. He called me up that day and he said, listen, man, he said, I saw your email and I thought, oh shit, another thing I have to look at. He said, I opened it up. I got one paragraph into the first page. I closed it and I called you.
Wow.
And he said, I want you to write for me. So I got timing, whatever you want to call it. I got very lucky.
Yeah, but you got to have good content too.
I tend to write a little bit like film and TV. So I'm going to try and hook you up front really quickly. And then if it's not your thing, then you can get out within the first 2 paragraphs kind of thing.
That's true. Yeah. So what's your creative process? Like when you sit down to write long form or adventure piece, do you have any routines or rituals that help you get into the flow? Or do you research?
I wish.
Rituals you can talk about?
Yeah. I truly wish I could say, yes, every day I get up at 7 a.m. and sit down with my coffee and I write 1,000 words and I'm super disciplined. And it's like, no, I am honestly all over the place. I will write anywhere at any time. What I mostly do is I will think about something for a long time and kind of work it out in my head until I'm either up against a deadline or up against a wall. Yeah. Or up against a wall where I can't really think about it anymore. Now I have to get it out. So it takes me a long time to write. The kind of work I do, which is more in the long form essays, allows that to happen. I'm not the kind of writer that just bangs off 1,000 words on reasons to visit Madrid kind of thing. And here, there, it's just not what I do. So I can't do that. So unfortunately, it sometimes takes me a really long time to get something out.
Once you get into the flow, does it pretty much pour out or do you have to take a couple shots at it, come back at it, circle around it like a dog taking a nap?
I love editing. So I will pour it out as quickly as I can. And then I have the luxury of being able to let it sit for a bit, come back to it and begin the editing process, which can take as much time as the thinking and writing process.
Gotcha.
And I'm a merciless editor too. There are publishers or editors that I've sent stuff to and it's about to go to print and I'm making changes at the 11th hour.
It's like, love that.
No, I just read that. No, can we please change this word? Because once I've finished something, once I've sold something and it's been delivered, it's completely out of my control.
Yeah.
And I will never read it again. I don't read my stuff in magazines at all or online or whatever, just because I'm going to kind of go, shit.
Yeah.
Why did I use that conjunction there?
I've heard that from people that listen to their podcast episode. I was talking to a guy the other day who said he listened to it and loved it. It was all great, but he said, but I just cringed when I answered a couple questions. And we all do that though. I mean, on the fly, it's tough.
Oh yeah. No, dude, you will totally get a text from me after this going, shit. Okay. When I said that, when I met with this, could you cut that out? Yeah. I did that a few times with Tony Jones. Yeah.
I'll bet. Yeah. I do the same thing. You've worked with some
course.
iconic brands like Field and Stream and the Fly Fish Journal. How do you balance brand messaging and storytelling to keep it authentic and engaging for readers? Do you consider the brand part of it, or do you just tell the story and it is what it is?
Yeah, I don't consider the brand part of it within reason. I know what a Fly Fish Journal story is going to be, let's say. And I've sent, and I've sent things to him. I sent him something last year, well, beginning of this year rather, that I knew wasn't his kind of thing, but I just wanted to get it under his radar. And Jason got back to me and said, yeah, man, that's cool, but it's not our thing. I totally get that. I don't think about that so much because I tend to write almost like a creative nonfiction personal essay. It's really just the story as it happened to me. Mm-hmm. I never pre-sell anything almost. I will never pitch unless I've got the piece to back it up.
Do you have a reader in your head while you're writing, or is it just you write it as it came out, as it happened, regardless of who's going to read it? You don't think about that.
I don't think about it as much. There are things that I will tailor. So I recently had a couple of pieces, again, in Yucatan Magazine, one on a tarpon trip in the north of the Yucatan and one on my favorite barber in the city. Those were tailored a little bit to that market. The fishing piece, I will repurpose and knock wood, sell to somebody else. Mm-hmm. More just tweaking that voice a little bit. Right. Getting what I think a fly fishing publication is going to want in that sense versus more of a general interest, which is what the Yucatan Magazine audience was after.
That makes sense. And how often do you take one piece and sell it to multiple magazines? Does that happen a lot? Are you able to tweak it that much or rarely?
As often as I can. No, because look, I mean,
makes sense.
Right. Let's be straight up here. There's not a lot of money in this.
Yeah.
So if you can find another outlet.
Well, not a lot of places either, right? I mean, there's
not a lot of places. Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate that I have this good relationship with the publisher at Yucatan Magazine, and that's regional specific and country specific, and sometimes it'll get translated to Spanish. That opens up the US market for me. Mm-hmm. So if I can double sell something, why not? Because one of the things that's super frustrating about this as well is that you spent a lot of time, you've done the trip or had the experience, you spent a month or so thinking about it, you've spent a month, if not more, writing it, editing it, whatever, and you sell it, great. If you're selling it to print, 5 months later, it's out, or 4 months later, it's out, and it's out for one issue.
Yeah.
And then it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it has a very short life for a tremendous amount of effort to get there. So if you can get more eyes on it, then power to you. Why not? You know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's smart. And speaking of adventure travel writing, of all the adventure travel stories you've written, is there one that left a deep impression on you, and why? What was it? That trip.
Yeah, a couple of things. I don't consider myself an adventure travel writer, to be honest. And whereas I think we talked about Clay a little bit earlier, I think Clay's very much an adventure. He's going on these really big adventures to have that experience and to write about it. Right. I don't do that as much. However,
but some of the fishing trips turn into adventure travel.
They're adventures. Yeah, no, definitely. I'm traveling and they're adventures.
It's not fun until the shit hits the fan. Come on.
Well, this is true. Yeah, and if you were reading my stuff, more often than not, fish are not caught. It's not. I'm trying to, and it's just my nature, I guess. I'm not interested in the grip and grin of writing.
Yeah.
It kind of frustrates me a little bit if I look on Instagram and take a look at some angler site and the landing page, and there's a grid, and it's just fish. And I don't actually get that. It's like, I understand that you've set out to catch a fish. You're a professional. You caught a fish. Here's the fish. Can you tell me about the 30 seconds before you caught that fish?
Right.
Can you tell me about the 5 minutes after you caught that fish? I'm way more interested in those kind of experiences. So yeah, sometimes fish are caught in my stories, but I'll really work around it. It's not the story I'm really interested in telling. Back to your question, Iceland. I lost my mind a little bit in Iceland. Have you been?
No, not yet. It's on the list.
Okay. It's an
Anybody wants to invite me to do some podcast stuff, I'm game to go.
Yeah, no. And if you need someone to carry your suitcase, please.
Maybe we should propose a joint thing to somebody and go capture 2 or 3, 4 people.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
It is an alien world with good looking people in sweaters. I mean, it's just, there's something about it. And I finally hit me that I began to lose environmental perspective. And by that, what I mean is I live in the middle of the woods. Yeah. I have foreground and middle ground and a distance view, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand the relationship between a tree and a cabin and a mountain or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now in Iceland, there are no trees, or there's 6 trees maybe in the whole place. And everything is just these very subtle shades of greens and browns and blacks from all this lava rock. And then when you drive down the road, there are no billboards at all. Very few, if any, road signs. So you just begin to get overwhelmed by this environment that seems off a little bit. At least from my perspective, it seems off.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're driving by a series of hills along the side, because you've got no foreground or middle ground, you can't tell if those hills are a kilometer away or 10 kilometers away.
Right.
So you've got no perspective. So you begin to lose that. And now what that did for me was put me in this kind of interesting way of looking at the world. So I'm driving along and I look at these hills and I think to myself, if a giant just stepped over that hill right now, it would seem like the most natural thing in the world.
Right.
Like it started to mess with me that way. So for me, the real challenge with Iceland was trying to find a way to communicate with it. Usually I have something called apophenia, and I definitely have a green apophenia, which is I find relationships in unrelated things. And I think that allows me to look at a woods in a certain way or look at a stream in a certain way and put something together as maybe an interesting perspective. Iceland messed me up on that a little bit until I finally hooked into a sea trout. I was there to fish for sea trout, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it was a shitty, crazy day. The river was up. It was muddy. I met my guide, and Iceland is a beat system. So you've paid for that river for that on that particular day. And he's like, well, it's like we fish or we don't fish. It's kind of up to you. I'm like, okay, let's fish. And it just was this crazy muddy river, whatever. And I threw my fly across into the seam and the sea trout just exploded out of the water and grabbed it. It was very cool.
Wow. But
we were in a little bit of a rough part of the river and there were 3 spills down to pools. And I thought, shit, if he goes over these, I'm going to lose him. Right. Mm-hmm. So now I'm kind of running after him a little bit because he's too big for me just to horse in. I slip, my waders tear. No, I'm completely soaked. Yeah. And he goes over the first one. It's like, okay, damn, I go over the first one. And then he goes over the second one. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm about to lose him. And he's in the third pool. And if he goes past that, it's a huge rapid and he's gone. Good. So I'm sitting there and we're stuck. So I think of it as a Rorschach image. So here's me, right? With my rod and my line, fish, line, rod, me again, right? Mm-hmm. We're stuck in this image and nobody's moving. Nobody's kind of giving an inch. Mm-hmm. So it just occurred to me that the only way I'm possibly going to land this fish is if I ask him to swim into my net. And I do so in Icelandic. Now, I don't speak Icelandic.
Or you thought it was Icelandic.
I'd been there for 36 hours. And I think that I shocked the fish that A, I asked and B, I spoke Icelandic. And he swam into my net.
Wow.
And that's my Icelandic story. So if I could blink and be anywhere in the world, it would be Iceland. And if that wasn't possible, the second place would be Patagonia. on the Argentinian side, which was just extraordinary. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, that was pretty interesting though. I think we all have our thing when we get out there. When you kind of get out there and it takes a while to get there. You got to go pretty far to get away from all the noise and things of where you live and city and all that stuff. And then once you go that far, you still have to go deep into wherever it is you are to get into the flow, if you will, right? I mean, I've had the same experience in Antarctica and Arctic both.
Really?
Yeah, you just have to get away, and it takes a while to shed all that stuff. It's like peeling off layers. You drive to the airport, there's one layer. You go through all the airport crap, you get on the plane, there's another layer. You go through all the however many hours of flying, there goes another layer. I went through this experience. I just got back from Norway recently to go do a trek. And it was the same thing. I went through all these, drive down to LA. That's a whole thing of shedding the Bishop layer, but then accepting the LA layer and dealing with that. And then getting to Norway and going through all the things in those cities and then driving out to where we were going to start this trek, and slowly every day more and more would peel off. And the next thing you know, you're done. You got to come back. But no, I get that. I think that's why a lot of us go do those things, is to shed those layers and get back to, if you will, our natural surroundings and where we all came from, which is in the middle of of nowhere. A lot of times with nothing back in the day. They had nothing. Or forebears, whatever they might have been.
Yeah.
So
listen, I think you're absolutely right. This idea of shedding those layers, which then allows you to expose yourself to whatever particular aspect of nature you're in.
Or accept where you are, right?
Or accept where you are. Yeah.
It throws crap at you, right? There's weather, right? All of a sudden, shit, it's raining sideways and cold. And you better accept it because that's what you got.
Yeah, no, I was never wetter than I think on that particular trip in Iceland. Like it was just rain coming sideways, and my waders were torn, and my wing jacket was useless. But I didn't care. I'm standing on the top of the world, having a conversation with a fish,
a nice big fish. Yeah,
it was a good fish. There's a fantastic essay written in 1944 by Pierre Trudeau. You're old enough to remember Pierre Trudeau, the former Prime Minister of Canada, in the 60s, 70s.
Yep.
He wrote it on paddling, essentially. He was a great outdoorsman. It's called Exhaustion and Fulfillment, the Ascetic in a Canoe or something. And there's this quote that I just absolutely love. And I think it really sort of sums up a lot of why I go back into the woods. And he talks about a canoeing trek. He says, what sets it apart is that it purifies you more rapidly than anything else. Mm-hmm. It's like travel 1,000 miles by train and you're a brute. Pedal 500 on a bicycle and you're basically bourgeois. But if you paddle 100 in a canoe, you're a child of nature. Mm-hmm. And I just absolutely love that idea of that connection of using the woods, the wilderness, the outdoors, whatever it is, to go back to a little bit of that wonder, that childhood state. If you and I were 12-year-old kids, we'd be out in the woods poking dead shit with a stick right now. We'd be building a fort.
Yeah.
We'd be marveling at that. And we've lost that a lot, I think.
Yeah.
And in many cases, we've given up on nature, but nature hasn't really given up on us. It's still waiting to embrace us and teach it what it can. There was an interesting study last year done about the new generation of kids. I'm not sure what to call them, but just parents have made them a little afraid of the woods, disconnected them a little bit. They're very uncomfortable with that. We see this all the time.
A lot of parents are. A lot of people in the world are.
A lot of parents are. It's probably a few generations below us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the upshot of this essay that I read was, if these kids don't have a relationship with the woods now, when they come into their own and when they come into power and when they come into control, they're not going to protect that which they fear and don't understand.
Yep.
And it's like, so it's like,
on.
Take your kids out. They're way more competent than we realize they are. There are certain schools in Western Europe where kindergarten kids go out and they make their own fire and they cook their own food.
I taught at a sixth grade outdoor school in San Diego for about 4 or 5 years.
Did you really? Yeah. There you go. Yeah. And it's like they can handle it.
Oh, totally. And these kids, it was kind of a outdoor / they called it race-human relations program, where we'd mix these inner city schools up at this camp for a week. And these kids would sleep in these cabins, and we'd take them on adventures, mini adventures. We'd go pond biology and animal tracking and all these things. And they just loved it. And first day, they're kind of a little intimidated, didn't jump in. But once you get them out there and they realize how fun it is, man, they just absorbed it and got dirty and dug in. And not all of them, of course, but yeah, no, it's awesome. And I think the other thing I'd like to say to people, I don't know where I got this phrase, but nature bats last. And at the end of the day, when it all comes down to man doing all the things man does, how many times do we see nature come along with a big old storm or a big old something and obliterate what man just did? Whether there's some spiritual thing that the world couldn't handle in one more parking lot or whatever it is, I don't know. But nature bats last, and she fixes things in a hurry.
Oh yeah, without it, you're not going to win. You're not going to win that battle.
No way.
You will temporarily, but you're not going to win that battle. That's interesting. Yeah, when my wife was younger, she was growing up in Canada, and in the city, Toronto, but every year her parents would send her on this canoe camp out in the Canadian wilderness, like flow plains and all that, where they'd spend a week or so doing skills, whatever, and then the second half of the trip, for a week, I believe, they would take, let's say, a dozen 10-year-old girls with two 16-year-old women, girl guides, and they'd go out for a week on a canoe trip into the wilderness, and they would carry their own shit and et cetera, and cook their own meals and whatever. I think about that now, and I think about some of the 10-year-olds and 16-year-olds I know now. It's like, well, A, I'm not sure how many could handle it, and B, I'm not sure how many parents would let their 10-year-old go on that kind of trip.
Well, B is the secret. Right? I think A, they could all handle it. They might not think they can handle it, but after they've been out there a couple of days, they'd be loving it. That's my experience working with kids. Yeah. But the parents are going to freak out.
They're going to totally freak out. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So you've written for niche publications like The Waiting List and Hatch Magazine and a lot of others like that. What do you think draws people to these outdoor activities? And how do you capture that passion in your writing?
So I'm not sure I understand, because they're niche publications. Yeah, without a doubt. But sorry, I don't understand how those relate to the question of.
Well, what do you think draws people to those activities? Is it the
activities or the publications?
The activities. Because they're pretty, fly fishing is as much as we think every place we go, we see a bunch of fly fishing, but it's still kind of a niche activity. Not everybody does it. And a lot of people are drawn to it for various reasons. Other people are pushed away from it because of those same reasons. Right? What do you think are some of those things that draw us to the activity of fly fishing, and how do you capture those things that draw us to it? So
the fly fishing is interesting, right? Because you're right. It's always been niche. It's always had this mantle of self-importance to it, I guess, or this is the purest form of fishing, etc.
Right.
It's
a little elitist.
It's a little elitist. It is the most written about sport in history of sports, actually. I mean, the people have been writing about fly fishing for hundreds, possibly hundreds of years. I don't know. There's certainly a beauty to it. It is an effective way to catch fish. I think that over the last number of years, we've seen the younger crowd come in, the trout bombs, the young kids that are a little more radical in what they're doing and all that stuff. I don't know if that's been good or bad for the industry. I saw a bumper sticker recently. I'm very close to Roscoe, New York, which is considered the birth of dry fly fishing in the U.S. Yeah, I'm very close to just storied waters where the giants have fished, which is kind of cool. And I saw a bumper sticker on somebody's truck, and it said, "Make fly fishing lame again." And it's like, yeah, okay. 100% sort of got.
You can say that about a lot of activities.
You can say that, yeah, but a lot of activities. Are there too many people fishing? I'm not going to say that, but it is getting more and more crowded out there. People are more and more interested. I think that COVID, people were more interested in getting out into the woods or taking advantage of opportunities out there. And there are certainly places that probably the West comes to mind where there's a lot of fuck you. I was here first. And you guys get out of here. I mean, drive around Montana with California plates.
Come up here for opening day here in the Eastern Shore is a holiday. It's called Fish.
Right.
It's just
Fish.
It's just a zoo here. I mean, there's just lines of people up by Lake Crowley waiting to put their boat in the water. If you go fishing on that day in any of the rivers and things, it's packed. It's crowded. There's a lot of people. LA is only 3.5 hours away, so we get a lot of folks. And then it mellows out again. But every weekend, when I first was coming up here, my grandfather lived here. You could go on some of these places and never see anybody. And I don't think that's even possible. I mean, sure, I'm sure there's some days that you can go not see anybody up in the upper Owens, but most of the time, there's already a couple of fishermen there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the upper Owens is tough because there's so much access along it, and it's just easy to pop into all of it. There is a place up around the Owens. I don't know if it's called the Gorge, but it is down at the bottom of a rather steep gorge. You know what I'm talking about?
The Gorge, yeah, you're right. Yep.
Is it called the Gorge? Yeah. Which obviously you have to work a little harder. So my feeling is there are always places where I just need to walk a half mile more than the next guy. Everybody's going to stick relatively close, but it's tough. I was fishing, or I was intending to fish the Willowee, which is a little famous stream up here in front of the Catskills Fly Fishing Museum, which is a very cool place. And I had just parked my car, and there were a bunch of guys fishing a pool, and I was going to head probably a quarter mile upstream because the day before I saw this little rock and I saw a fish feeding there. He looked like kind of an interesting fish. So I wanted to go back and see if I catch that fish. But I had parked in that parking lot down there. And I just walked up to the river and was heading up the bank when this guy turned around. I think he was a guide, and it was because seemed to be with a client. And he just turned around. And the first thing he said was like, "You're not thinking of fishing here, are you?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm heading up there." "Okay, because I don't fucking want you here." I'm like, "All right, dude. It's 8:00 on a Sunday morning."
Yeah.
Like, I'm very clearly not in the water, and I'm very clearly walking up here, but some tempers are getting a little frayed. Anyway, we got off on a little tangent here. If I honestly answered the question as to why fly fishing, that was maybe why people are drawn to that. Okay. I go back to that Trudeau essay of a canoe and traveling in a canoe. So if I travel in a canoe, if I travel by train, if I travel by bicycle, essentially I'm on a rail or I'm on a road or something like that, right? I'm separated from the land, if you will. There's a layer or so, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm in a canoe, yes, I'm separated, but I'm separated by a thin Kevlar, let's say, or aluminum, whatever it is. But I'm also sitting in the water. It's kind of an interesting perspective. The bulk of my weight is sort of below the water a little bit.
Right.
And I find fly fishing the same way. It's a different experience if I'm standing in the water than if I'm standing on a bank or I'm standing on a dock.
Yep.
I'm now all of a sudden going to have a stronger connection. And I think people respond to that. When you get them out there, the smartest thing I ever did was when I first started fly fishing, and it was out after that Ireland trip, got back to San Francisco, where I was living for a short period of time. And then booked a trip up North Fork of the Yuba, California.
Yep.
Okay. And I had a great time, went out with a few guys. They showed me the ropes, had an amazing time. Got back to San Francisco, said to my wife, "We're going to go up here next weekend." Booked a guide, got her up there. An hour in the river. She's standing, she's looking around, beautiful water, fish, trees, mountains. And she turns to me and said, "I get it."
That's with a lot of outdoor activities. I think you connect with the land, and not only the land, but all the things. It's all the things, the land, the noises that nature makes or doesn't make, the quietness, the solitude, all those things.
Yeah.
That's what I love about living here. I mean, midweek here, there's nobody around. You could pretty much go anywhere, and it's getting harder and harder, but still on the weekends, it's very crowded. But if you can get out midweek, you can find somewhere to have the place to yourself. For fishing, for hiking, for climbing, for whatever it is. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's incredible.
So with outdoor brands and publications becoming more aware of the environmental impact, how do you see this influencing the content you create? Do you find yourself telling more of these sustainability, nature-focused stories, or do you focus on activities? Has it impacted your writing at all?
It doesn't. I don't write about that. I don't write about the environment in that sense, just because I'm not sure what story to tell. And my stuff is it's very personal. So I'm not trying to change anybody's mind about anything. I'm not trying to educate anybody about anything. I don't think that's my strong suit. I think there are people there, they're very focused on that, are very good at it.
Do you change
Still
your
do
writing though
that.
after you write it though? Does it pop into your head and maybe came out in something in a way that you hadn't planned, and I gotta change that a little bit? Does that happen? Or
Um,
it doesn't even come up in your writing?
it doesn't really occur. I will occasionally change location a little bit because I don't want to spot burn. Spot burning is a huge thing right now. There are certain fly fishing forums where they will not allow you to mention a river, let alone the access or a pool or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. And it's not like I'm trying to be an asshole about it. I just don't want to getting out there to the point where now the next year there's 20 guys there who then can bring their friends in, et cetera, whatever that is.
Pretty tough.
That I will tweak a little bit. If there is an environmental story to tell, I'm happy to tell it. I just haven't really come across that yet. But I think it was somebody who's doing a very good job on that is Steve Duda at Patagonia. He's in charge of fly fishing writing, but his stuff is always sort of with a great environmental bend. It's fascinating stuff. It's just not really my world at this point, or no one's asked me to write about that. If they did, that would be a different thing.
Yeah, everybody has their own niche. That makes sense, yeah. By now, many of you know that on Friday, September 27th, after punishing the Big Bend region of Florida, Hurricane Helene hit Asheville and western North Carolina hard, with rivers surging nearly 40 feet, sides of mountains crumbling, sweeping away everything in its path, causing catastrophic damage. Two Asheville-based outdoor brands, Rockgeist and Asheville Adventure Company, were completely devastated. But in one of many true community spirit examples, small brands like Fuel Goods have come together to launch Together We Rise, a campaign offering a limited edition t-shirt with 100% of the proceeds going to rebuild these beloved businesses. Visit fuelgoods.com to grab your t-shirt and stand strong with Asheville. Let's rise up together. Now let's get back to the show. What inspires you the most when you're writing about the outdoors and adventure travel? Does the place you visit shape your narrative, or do you go into a story with something already in mind?
I never go with something in mind. Absolutely never. Other than maybe there's a goal I want to achieve in Iceland. I'd like to catch a sea trout. In Nova Scotia, I'd like to catch a salmon.
Right.
I never do. I let the place shape me. I let the place inform me, I guess. And I never take notes if I'm on a trip. Yeah. Wow. I try to remember everything. So now it's months later, it's going to come out and I'm going to be honest. There's truth and then there's truth. It's how I remember it, mulling it over in my mind so many different times. And
some of those places you get to go to, they just become imprinted in your brain, right? It just has such a huge impact. That does me anyway. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can close my eyes and be back in a particular spot in Iceland in a second, or Patagonia or Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia fishing for salmon. Like I know these places intimately.
Right.
Yeah. They get imprinted. The other thing I think that what's interesting. So I just got back from the Canary Islands and that was a press trip. And listen, since I was a kid growing up before internet and all that stuff, Canary Islands is like, oh my God, it seems so exotic. And this island filled with canaries and there are no canaries there.
So it's one of those places too. I think we remember from our early days of history, right? It's one of the first places you hear that makes that imprint on your brain. It's like, wow, that sounds like I want to be there. I want to go there. One of the first places.
100%. Yeah. No, you're right. So the opportunity came up and said, of course I jumped at it. And it was very interesting. It was brought over along with a few other people by Tenerife, for the island of Tenerife tourism to experience the adventure side of the island. And so that was what was interesting about that. It was going to be, okay, we're going to hike, we're going to climb, we're going to road bike, mountain bike, et cetera. All these like parasail, sea kayak, all these cool things. It was great. It was a good trip. The organizers did a really nice job. But one of the challenges with this kind of trip, and I don't do these often, and I talk with the organizer a bit afterwards about this. One of the challenges that I felt was that you want to show us everything, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
Which means we're getting a bite of everything.
Yeah. And you're on the go. It just wears you out.
And you're on the go and you're wet. It's like, okay, now we're all having dinner here and having dinner here. And listen, I understand that. And they certainly have a beautiful place. But what I did was I stayed on for an extra 5 days and went to the capital because I needed to, I wanted to see it and I wanted to be there, but I needed to kind of find the soul of the place a little bit. And I didn't get that on the press trip. And I talked about that a little bit with the organizers saying it would be cool arranged a day or two for everybody to, in this case, go to the capital, which is not an hour and a half away from where we were so far, and just kind of be on their own. Like, let them go out and explore and kind of find the soul of the place. And it was really interesting for me. It took me a little while to kind of get into the rhythm and going out for dinner at 10 o'clock at night and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I finally found it, Rick. I was staying right downtown. There's a beautiful park across the street from me. I would go and sit in a park bench for a couple of hours every day. And I would just people watch.
Yeah.
And I saw the little kids dancing to music that someone was playing. I saw the old folks walking along and still holding hands, this kind of stuff. The school kid teenage, doing school kid teenager stuff after school. It was then that I really got to get into the rhythm, find the soul of the place. And now I have something to write about that I can now lay across the really cool hike we did up to that mountain in the clouds and that really cool cycle or seeing the pilot whales or whatever that is.
You can weave it all together.
So that's a convoluted way of answering the question. And the answer is I let the place inform me, or I have to have the place inform me. Because I'm not a listicle writer. I'm just not going to, here are the 5 things you're going to do, and do them in this order.
Do you do that on a lot of your trips or most of your trips? You plan a couple of extra days just to get in the flow of the place?
If I can, if it's possible and feasible, absolutely. Because I know that I'm going to have an experience that's going to be true to me. Like, it's going to be a singular experience. And I'm not having to look this direction because somebody's asking me to look this direction or eat this or whatever. Yeah, for the most part, I do that. But I spend a lot of time alone. I spend a lot of time traveling alone on these things. So I'm very used to just kind of chilling and
solo.
Yeah. There you go.
I get a lot of shit for that, but too bad.
Yeah. Well,
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is what it is. We all have our thing.
I do love solo traveling. And one of the things I like about it is because inevitably, I think when you're by yourself, you feel a little lonely. So that kind of forces you to engage and it forces you to talk to people a little more, which I like, because then I'm going to feel less lonely, and I'm going to find out a little bit about a particular place. And one of the real travel secrets, and I'm going to let you into the deep secret.
Gonna let into the club. Here we go. So turn the mic off.
And it took me forever to figure this out. Is if I go to a place, and it just really came into focus when I was in Buenos Aires, I have a list of the top 10 restaurants and et cetera. But I asked, staying in a cool little boutique hotel, and asked the concierge, the guy at desk, like, where would you go in the neighborhood? So he says, okay, go to this place, which is great. Everybody around the world is going to tell you their little local place. And it was great. It was a perfect place. I went back the second night to the same place for dinner. And they sort of acknowledged that, but whatever. It was cool. I went back the third night. And on the third night, when I walked in, the owner's like, dude, you're back. Come on over here. Sit at the bar. I want you to try this. I want you to try that. It was this, and I've subsequently done that in Istanbul, all kinds of places around the world, where it's just, you're showing them that you appreciate them way more than just a nice tip at the end of the one meal you're going to have, and then you're going to go on to that restaurant or that restaurant. And I get more out of a place by doing that than I would if I was going to the 5-star restaurants and stuff like that. The other thing I do, I'll get haircuts wherever I am. And this is courtesy of a good barber in Tenerife. But because again, you're going to learn about life in a barber chair, right?
That's right.
Yeah. It was in Istanbul, and I had a more of a older beard at that time, I guess. And I went to this local barber, and I said, he's like, well, what do you want? We kind of worked it out, translation. And I said, give me the Turkish man. So now I walk out with my hair sort of over and this big, thick mustache, right? Everything else is clean shaved. I got this big, thick mustache. I look like a Turkish guy.
Yeah.
So the next day I'm at the airport and going through immigration to get out. And he's looking at my Canadian passport, and he's looking at me, and he said, no, you're Canadian. You're Turkish.
It worked. Wow. That's impressive.
No, dude, seriously. And he's like, no, he literally had to bring his boss over And they had a conversation about how I just did not look like my passport and I looked like a Turkish guy.
Wow.
So there's no way I was Canadian. So
Impressive.
there you go.
I like that's good advice. I'm going to use that haircut advice. I love going into the local Bishop barbershop here to get a haircut. Man, those guys, the stories, you just sit there and listen. And it's just all the locals go there to get their haircut. There's like 3 guys, 3 chairs. A lot of banter going back and forth. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Barbershop is the new campfire, right? We sit around campfires for thousands of years.
Or the city
telling stories or not.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, do you have any advice for aspiring writers and producers?
Yeah.
Looking to break into the genre or the industry?
Yeah, I'll specifically talk about writers. I don't produce so much anymore. I don't, and it's not to say that I don't want to. And listen, Outdoor Brands, if you're hearing this, feel free to call me. I can help you connect with your customers.
There you go.
That said, know your value. Don't write for free. First off, the person that competing with you, if you want to say, as a writer, are the people who write for free. And stop doing that. And I know there's all these new publications out there and they don't have high budgets, and I certainly respect them. But listen, if you write for free for somebody, you will never be able to get money from them in the future. You've set that level of precedent. I know my value because I was professional in a different industry. I know what I'm worth. I know what my writing is worth. I feel what it's worth. And if you can't meet it, great. I totally understand. And maybe next time we'll make it work, or maybe next time I'll tweak something a little smaller because I like your publication and I'd love to work with you. And we can figure that out.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give anything to anybody for free.
Yeah.
That would be the first. The second thing is, and I think this is harder and harder to do because we've got all these outlets out there that are demanding so much content on almost a daily basis. Slow down a little bit. Take your time. I have got something out as good as I could possibly make it. And I know it's good for the publication at the time. And I've banged it out in a week, but I've come back to it a month later and said, fuck me, man. Why did I write that? Like that is not good. It served a purpose, but I feel it's a little ding on me. I'm not really happy about that. So when you can take your time, put it down, walk away, come back, change your environment a little bit, whatever it is, to try and look at it with fresh eyes. And then if you're fortunate enough to have somebody to read for you, not so much for content, depends on that relationship, but there are a few people that I will trust for spelling and grammar and things like that I will sort of put something through. Now
There's
use
tools. There's AI tools that did you sit through my AI presentation at OWAA?
No, I was on the last day and I apologize for that because I think I ran to you in the morning and said I was going to come, and then I just need to sort of sit and take a break. So I went.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no, there's one tool you need to check out. It's called Descript. And Howard and I both use it for podcasts. But what it does is it takes your transcript of a podcast or your transcript of your writing, you load it up into there, and it shows you all the filler words and all the this and that and the other thing, the garbage that you can just click a button and boom, it's gone. So check that out.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe I'll take a look at that sometime.
I suggested that to lots of writers. Every presentation I've given about podcasting tools, I tell them that this one, if you write or record, you should check this out. So anyway.
I think you said that in Alabama last year, if I recall.
I might have.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I did try and use ChatGPT a few times.
Yeah.
First of all, I tried to use it for writing, and it's like
it's a different use case.
Yeah, it was not what it put out was not good. It's like, oh, this person does this under these conditions and this result, and it's like what it wrote was not great. However, I've used it a couple times. So it's like check spelling, check grammar, check passive voice kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I use it a lot for ideas. Yeah.
Do you? And that's interesting. Oh, yeah. We should talk about that sometime because I haven't quite figured that one out yet. But the last thing I put through with the spelling and grammar, it came back saying, this is very well written. And there's really nothing to change about this. Nice. Well done. And I'm staring at the screen. It's like, fuck, man. I just,
wow, that holy grail. I've reached the pinnacle,
right?
Yeah. I got the Academy Award.
There's nowhere else to go. Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. I use it a lot to just create ideas and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was Emmanuel Rose. Have you met him? I think he's been at the OWAA conference. Howard and I do some work with him, and we were going to do. We came up with the idea. I forget it was he or me came up with the idea, but of 4 episodes about planning and going on your adventure. I think he was getting ready to go on a week-long fishing trip, and I said it would be fun to come up with some content. So I went into ChatGPT and I said, "Hey, Emmanuel Rose is and I'm a blah 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 podcaster, and we're going to do 4 episodes about." I forget what I said, planning an adventure, trip planning, something like that. Give me content for 4 episodes. And bam, it spit out 4 different things from the beginning, right, of getting your vehicle ready to the end of actually when you get there, selecting a campsite and stuff. It was pretty impressive. I've been impressed by that.
Oh, okay.
But it's all dependent on how you word the question.
I think so. And I haven't spent enough time. Yeah, I haven't spent enough time yet to figure out the right prompts. And and at this point, it really doesn't matter so much for me anymore. But at some point, I'd like to play around with it a little more without a doubt. Did you end up using these ideas? Did you do the trip and use these ideas? Or
I'm going to use the ideas. We're going to record 4 episodes based on a lot of those ideas. Yeah, I've tweaked them a little bit.
Where are you going?
We're not going anywhere. We're just going to do episodes about if you want to go on a 4-day adventure fishing trip or something. We haven't.
I see.
Out yet.
Yeah. Okay.
It's awesome. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So, what's your favorite piece of outdoor gear, fly fishing gear, under $100?
Yeah, under $100. Well, I mean, look, that could be. That could be the right fly. But I will say there's something called the Monomaster, and it's. I mean, there are. Okay, it's about this big. It's a small gray tube. I don't have one handy, but essentially what it's for is you clip it to your vest or your belt, and it's just for you to feed extra tippet or fishing line or all your cutoffs and stuff like that. There's a little sort of bristly wheel on the inside. You feed the line in, it catches it, and it just revolves around the thing until it fills up. You take it apart, you can cut all your line off, dispose of it properly. I think that's a pretty handy little, it's a pretty handy little item because I don't want to toss my tippet, 3 inches or whatever, a fluorocarbon, whatever, which is going to last for 100 years in the environment, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little thing, but I think it's a pretty feel good thing. I don't know. I mean, I bought mine a long time ago. It was probably like $7. It's probably $15 now, kind of thing. But I kind of like that one. Yeah.
As a writer, do you have a couple of favorite books as a reader of books, or do you read a lot?
I do.
Don't have time. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't read fishing work that much. I don't read outdoors work that much for the reason, and I'm changing that now, but when I initially started, I didn't want to be unduly influenced by it. But John Gierach, I don't know how to say his name. I think it's Gierach. Anyway, John Gierach just died, and I've got all his books, and he's a fantastic writer.
Great writer.
My God, this guy just wrote beautiful stuff. So I've certainly read all him. But if I go to one in particular that is seminal in my life, is a book written in 1960 called My Side of the Mountain.
Do you know I've heard of that. Yeah, I heard that. I know that story.
Okay. It's written by a woman named Jean Craighead George. And it concerns a young, I think he's 14-year-old boy named Sam, who lives in New York City, and it's 1960. And he tells his parents that he's going to go to the Catskill Mountains to learn how to live off the land. And being 1960, they say, okay, good luck, son. So
Woodstock, here I come.
Yeah, exactly. He is. Yeah. Well, yeah. It was a few years later.
Different.
He's got like $40, a ball of twine and an axe or something. He hitchhikes his way to the Catskill Mountains, right where I am. And he gets dropped off on the side of a mountain. He goes up this mountain, and essentially the book is written almost as a diary for a year of his life up there. He finds a big hemlock tree that's a little rotted out the bottom. So he kind of carves it out and creates a home for himself. Learns how he makes a stove out of some clay. He learns how to hunt for himself. He eventually captures a baby peregrine falcon and teaches it to hunt for him. The falcon's name is Frightful. And along through the book, there's little drawings he's done of how to do this and et cetera, et cetera. And I read this book probably when I was 11 years old. And it was just like, oh my God, like I get this is the life I want. And I started out that way. I've started out living by the woods and spending a lot of time there. But then, life took a different turn, school and work and all that. I was a city guy. 10, 12 years ago, bought this particular place, this camp in the Catskills. And I thought, I'm going to pick up the book again. Pulled up my original copy that I bought in 1970, right? Dog ear. And I started reading it only to realize that it is set 5 miles down the road from me. There's a little town called Delhi where when Sam wants to research something, he goes to the Delhi library.
Wow.
And my mind was just blown that 50 years later, I found myself in the place that I dreamed about as a kid.
Spot. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the Delhi library now has a whole wing devoted to this book and the story and the author, whatever. Yeah. That's pretty incredible. Anybody who comes to my place has never been here before leaves with a copy of that book.
That's cool.
I've got a dozen or so that I just.
I bet that library is amazing. Yeah.
It's pretty cool small town library. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of artists up here, a few friends who've done paintings for that particular exhibit at the library for the My Side of the Mountain exhibit. So that's pretty cool. Someday I'd like to do a whole, like My Side of the Mountain festival. I think I could get a lot of interest one day, but that's on a burner somewhere.
There you go. For future project. That's good. Well, as we wrap up here, if people want to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, fairly active on Instagram. So there it's at _real_DNM, David Nicholas Mcllvaney. I'm sure you'll have that in the show notes.
Yep. Real is in fishing reel, or real is in REAL? Real.
REA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny. I mean, it's not just all outdoor stuff. It's just whatever crosses my mind. And then somebody was suggesting you need to do like outdoor specific and then and have that and keep your private one and have that one, the REL. Haven't quite got there yet. Or davidandmcllvaney.com, which will take you to my Medium page where I just tend to keep all my writing.
Cool.
Yeah. And other than that, I've got a few things coming up and out relatively soon. So yeah.
Awesome. Good for you. Yeah. Cool. Well, it's been great speaking with you on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you at another conference soon. I'm not sure what's coming up, but I'm sure something's around.
Chattanooga.
That's right. Next year.
Chattanooga, which I'm really looking forward to. It looks like I've never been. Looks like a great place. Looks like a outdoor centric place. Mm-hmm. A beautiful little town. So yeah. And I think that just looking at the initial roster of speakers, there may be a few more hunting and angling oriented talks, which would be kind of interesting. And I know that's got the interest of some of the guys. There's the OWO does a hunting Zoom talk once a month, which is cool. So there's a bunch of us on that. And you hunt as well, right? You said, or grew up hunting?
A little bit. I grew up hunting, but I don't hunt much anymore. I don't really have time. So it's all that as you get older, it's like, man, I got to pick like 4 things I can commit to.
It's funny. It is tough. I get asked all the time, do you tie flies? I'm like, yeah, no, I've never tied in. Forgive me, I've tied one fly in my life. And the reason I don't do it is because my hobby doesn't need a hobby.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like I would just get so down that road that it's like, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. And the other reason is that I really like fly shops. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to a new area, I'm going to go into that fly shop. I'm going to pick their brains a little bit. The least I could do is buy $30, $40 worth of flies from these guys. So I kind of like that relationship we have as well. So, yeah.
Right on. Well, we'll link to all that stuff in the show notes.
Cool.
Well, thanks, David. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been fantastic talking to you, Rick. I'm so happy that we connected in El Paso this year.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you in Chattanooga.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, ricksays.com, where you'll find show notes and links to everything we talked about and more. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week, and thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast.